So an HSP is a highly sensitive person. So anybody that it's a personality trait, just like you mentioned, that has an increased sensitivity to physical, emotional, or social stimulus. And so and what's interesting is that there's another diagnosis that's called sensory perception disorder. So there's sensory perception sensitivity and sensory perception disorder. So there are two different things. So an HSP has the sensory perception, and they pick up on all kinds of stimuli. The disorder is different, and that is where someone cannot function. So they both may notice things like, for example, they may feel like bothered by a tag in their shirt. And the highly sensitive people notice things like that. Like they're very sensitive to temperature. They're sensitive to like the seam in their sock. Like when you put a sock on, they want the sock straight, or they don't want the seam in the sock at all. and that can be the same with someone that has the sensory processing disorder. But that when it said the disorder, it is more of a mental health diagnosis because there's difficulty functioning. They can have angry outbursts. They can have tantrums. There's a lot of differences in the way that they deal with that sensory perception.
Hi, EnvisionAirs. Welcome to the EnvisionAir podcast. This is the podcast where we envision living our best lives, ones filled with unlimited possibilities, by exploring everyday topics related to health, wealth, community, and love. This podcast is for information purposes only and should not be considered to be medical, legal, tax, financial, or other professional advice.
This podcast does not encourage or endorse any illegal activity.
We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liability that may arise from the information in this podcast.
The views explored in the podcast may not always be those of the host.
On today's episode, we're going to be focusing on the health pillar of the podcast and talking about what it is to be a highly sensitive person, also known as an HSP. It's estimated that 25% of the population can be described as an HSP. That is, people who feel things or experience emotions more deeply. And these can be both positive and negative. American psychologists Dr. Elaine Aron and Dr. Arthur Aron first coined the term HSP in the 1970s. And the body of research has grown steadily since. HSP isn't considered a mental health issue, but some researchers consider it more of a personality trait that involves increased responsiveness to positive and negative influences. According to Dr. Elizabeth Scott in an article in Very Well Mind, researchers have identified several characteristics that were common in HSPs. These can include avoiding violent movies or TV shows because they feel too intense or leave you feeling unsettled, being deeply moved by beauty, whether it's expressed in art, nature, or in the human spirit, being overwhelmed by sensory stimuli, such as noisy crowds, bright lights, or uncomfortable clothing, feeling the need for downtime, needing to retreat to a dark or quiet room, and having a rich and complex inner life, going inward into deep thoughts and having strong feelings. So if you identify with any of these traits, or you know someone who does, or you're just curious and interested in learning more about HSPs, this is the episode for you. And I'm super excited that we have the amazing Karen Hall, who is the podcast host of The Hero Within, and is also a holistic life coach who trained under the renowned Marianne Williamson. And she focuses her practice on helping individuals struggling with parenting, relationships, and nervous system regulation. She also identifies as an HSP herself and is going to be speaking with us today about living as an HSP and offering advice on how those who are HSPs can live their most fulfilling life. So a very, very, very warm welcome. Karen, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, I'm so happy to be here and with all of your EnvisionAirs who are seeking and want to know more. I love that your audience are people that want to learn and they want to grow. And so I'm just so excited to share these things because I didn't know about HSPs. We didn't even have that term, when I was young. And so, but as we started seeing these things, and Dr. Aron and her husband did the research. It was so fascinating when I learned about it, and it was so validating. So I hope that as your listeners hear some of these things, that if they are an HSP or if they know someone that is an HSP, it will help them understand themselves and others better.
100%. That's my hope too. So with this podcast episode, so I think a good starting point would actually be, what is an HSP? I appreciate that I gave a little bit of an overview, but I know that you not only have lived it, but you also have a lot of knowledge in terms of research. So I'd love to hear what an HSP is.
So an HSP is a highly sensitive person. The sensitivity part, all of us will probably say, bingo. That part is kind of easy. But so anybody that it's a personality trait, just like you mentioned, that has an increased sensitivity to physical, emotional, or social stimulus. And so and what's interesting is that there's another diagnosis that's called highly sensitive sensory perception disorder. So there's sensory perception sensitivity and sensory perception disorder. So there are two different things. So an HSP has the sensory perception, and they pick up on all kinds of stimuli. The disorder is different, and that is where someone cannot function. So they both may notice things like, for example, they may feel like bothered by a tag in their shirt. And the highly sensitive people notice things like that. Like they're very sensitive to temperature. They're sensitive to like the seam in their sock. Like when you put a sock on, they want the sock straight, or they don't want the seam in the sock at all. and that can be the same with someone that has the sensory processing disorder. But that when it said the disorder, it is more of a mental health diagnosis because there's difficulty functioning. They can have angry outbursts. They can have tantrums. There's a lot of differences in the way that they deal with that sensory perception. So just to comment on that, because a lot of people get that confused. They think, oh, if you're a highly sensitive person, does that mean that you have autism or something? It's not. Right. It's not the same at all. A person that does have autism may also be a highly sensitive person, but it's not. They don't go together all the time.
Okay, that makes sense. I appreciate that clarification because you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Because some people think, there's, again, I guess the research is still growing and still developing. I know you mentioned that Dr. Aron she started the research. Well, I mentioned that she started the research in 1970s and it's kind of grown and evolved. And I know you've mentioned that there's a list of characteristics also that she helpfully put together.
Right. And so do you want to just go to that list right now, or do you want to just talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, it's up to you. You tell me. What do you think?
Yeah, let's talk about it just a little bit more because, one of the things that is really interesting about HSPs is, so we pick up on stimuli around us quickly. but because there's so much stimuli going on in the world, sometimes it can be overwhelming. But sometimes people describe it as like spidey senses, like we can feel a vibe in a room. Like when we go into a setting, our neuroception is so keen that we pick up on expressions. If eyebrows are furrowed, or if somebody's squinting, or something. We don't always know what it means. And many times, a highly sensitive person that has not worked on this quality within ourselves and gotten training on skills on how to deal with this influx of stimuli, our brain does default to negativity, no matter if you're a highly sensitive person or not. Yes. So if I wasn't highly sensitive and I walked into a room and somebody looked at me like this, my brain would probably default to the fact that what's wrong? Are they unhappy with me? Are they annoyed with me? Whatever. Because our brain looks for problems to solve in order to keep us safe. So it says, uh-oh, I see something over there that might be a threat to my survival. I might be, isolated. I might be ostracized because that person is looking at me like that. Yes. And so anybody defaults to that. The highly sensitive person is even more keen on that, where somebody else might miss that expression. We pick up on it really fast. We pick up
Yes.
on nuances. They're just subtle things like somebody's sighs. And many times when I talk to someone on the phone, and I'll hear something in their voice and I'll say, what's wrong? And what's going on? And they'll say, I don't always know that.
Wow.
And they don't even know, oftentimes they don't tell me, but I just hear a difference. So this neuroception is so keen that, but it can serve us really well. Now, one of the interesting things about HSPs is that as we're taking all of this in, a lot of times we're quiet because we're trying to process it. We're trying to make sense. What does it mean? And that's why many times people think that HSPs are slow. Like they think, oh, they're slow to react, or, there's different terms that people
Yes.
HSPs, and also the introvertedness. They think, oh, well, they're shy because, they're kind of stepping back and we listen, and take in all of that, trying to match
Right.
expressions and the energy that we feel from people and what is being said. We're just constantly assessing the whole thing.
Wow.
So it can be very interesting. But one of the things that they found is that HSP is, they found it associated in all kinds of species, which was so fascinating. Fruit flies. I'm like, there's a highly sensitive fruit fly. Oh my word.
Yes.
So they went through all these different species and found that there is a genetic propensity. And so what they found is, and so they even studied the brain. So they went into the brains. And so while I was, for example, Dr. Aron had people look at couples, look at pictures of people with different expressions. And then she monitored the brain flow to different parts of the brain where we assess emotion, or different things. And she found that the highly sensitive people had an increased brain flow when they looked at pictures of somebody that, for example, had a sad expression. And if it was their partner, they had an even greater reaction. Whereas a person that didn't have the highly sensitive traits didn't have that same response, which I found fascinating, that there's a physiological thing going on within our body. Another study that they did with monkeys, rhesus monkeys have many parallel traits. And so one of the things that they found with these monkeys were they kind of decided, like, some of the monkeys exhibited behaviors that they called uptight. So they said, oh, those monkeys are just kind of tense. So then they studied them and they found that they exhibited these highly sensitive personality traits as well.
Wow.
So, and they had the same blood flow, when they were connected, when they were disconnected. So I was like, wow. So for me, for example, if I sense that I'm disconnected in some way, it's very threatening for me. I feel fear when that comes up, because connection is so vital to me, that if I feel that there's some disconnection, I can feel very uncomfortable.
100%.
But one of the things that was also interesting in this research was they found that the person with the highly sensitive personality traits, that when they had gone through something, they felt it intensely. So you feel things so intensely inside, which serves the memory. So if I come back to a situation that is similar, I quickly retrieve that data and I am able to then deal with that situation with that previous data. So I remember things. And that was another thing that she found in her research, which I thought was fascinating. People always tell me, you have this Rolodex in your brain.
Wow.
and things come back to me. So it's interesting to learn to deal with that, because I can, like, for example, I write in a journal, and that's a very healing way for me to process things and to make sense of things. I use a different part of my brain. But when I go back and read journal entries, I am transported back in time, and I feel the emotion as if I was going through it for the first time, which is a joyous experience if it's a positive thing.
Sure.
But recently I was researching through my journal. I was trying to find something to pull in. And I came across a very painful experience. Oh my goodness. I just felt the pain so much. I looked at people as if we were all back in the same situation. And I was like, okay, Karen, we are not back there. We have all progressed. We have all grown. but my feeling, it was like I was watching a movie and I was just so involved in the whole thing.
Wow.
And honestly, I looked around. So it's almost like PTSD, in many ways, in a positive and a negative way. And so,
yes.
but I have to know how to deal with that when that happens, because say, for example, it was with my partner, and I was reading something where we'd had a conflict, and then he comes home in real time.
Yes.
I could, misperceive things, say he's had a bad day at work or something. I could think, oh, there he goes again, just, here we go. We're having the fight again or whatever.
Right.
And so I have to be very careful with correctly interpreting things. And that has been the journey of my life, is how to learn to correctly interpret things and then what to do with those emotions that come up. I'm also an empath, which those are not always the same. Sometimes they go together, sometimes they don't. But
Okay.
so I feel things deeply in many ways.
Yeah.
And so it has been a journey, and that's one of the things that has attracted me to life coaching, because like when I was a girl, my dad noticed these gifts in me, and he said, you pick up on things so quick. He never used the word sensitive, so I didn't connect it with that way.
Yes.
I was told that I was too sensitive, so I thought that was a bad thing to be too sensitive. I mean, I still default to that thinking when my emotions get highly escalated. I'm like, I get so annoyed with myself. And but anyway, so it took me, if you want to hear that story, it took me a long time to change my perception about myself in that way, because one of the things about HSPs is that if the caregiver doesn't understand it, it can be very annoying.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And so my dear mother didn't understand it. And I didn't know at the time that she was worried about me. I thought as a child that she didn't like that quality about me, because she would say, oh, you're so sensitive. And I heard there's something wrong. And I would look at other people and I would think, oh, I could see they get their feelings hurt, but then they get over it. They're like, oh, well, whatever,
Yes.
Not me. I would ruminate. I would think about it. Why did they say that? Why did they act that way to me? And then I would, when I finally had figured it out, I would think, well, why can't I let this go? Why can't I just move on?
Yes.
But I felt it so deeply. And so I didn't know as a child that my mother was worried about me. She was worried, oh, I don't want my daughter to have pain, to have so much in her life. I don't get her feelings hurt and then impact her life, and so she was always trying to teach me, just be like a duck and let it roll off your back. And I'm like, my back has Velcro on it and everything gets stuck there. And she was just like, well, just, so start each day fresh. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So anyway, but my dad, I did not know that he was a highly sensitive person, and he's also an empath. And so
interesting.
He was trying to help me notice the positive traits, but he never used the word sensitive. So I didn't have sensitivity as a positive thing for many, many years. And then one day I remember, it was a process. It wasn't just overnight, but I remember I was dealing with something, and my dad has passed away, but I heard his voice when he told me, you have a gift. And he said, that I had a gift in the way that I could interact with people and pick up on things, and then calm, help emotionally regulate the energy that was going on. And all of a sudden I felt like it was inspiration. It was a spiritual experience for me, and I felt like it was divine, that I saw myself differently. I was like, oh, this is a gift. And I thought, wow. I am more sensitive to other people and people. And I started to pick up in my memory, I started to remember. And then going forward, I started to see and hear, I heard things differently, because people would say, like on the phone, oh, how did you know that something was wrong when you just heard my voice for 2 seconds,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Saw that it served me in so many ways. And so I started to be grateful that I was sensitive, instead of feeling shame. I felt so much shame for so many years. And I still do. I still default to that at times, and I have to work. I have to remember my tools, and I have to go back and read, and I have to use my tools to emotionally regulate myself, because when I start to feel shame, those emotions start regulating and I forget everything.
Yes.
So it's very interesting. So being a highly sensitive person comes with many challenges, and there can be challenges in adapting to new circumstances.
Yes.
Sometimes, like a lot of people will say to highly sensitive people, in addition to saying, you're so sensitive, they can say, what an overreaction. That's like, fighting words in my book. And so, for a lot of us, we've heard negative things about ourselves from other people who don't understand it.
Yeah.
And however, highly sensitive people also have very strong bonds with people. And so connect with people that have similar energy. I often say that when I connect with people, I feel like they're family. I don't think we're friends. I think we're family. And so
beautiful.
For me, connection with people is just so important. Many highly sensitive people have spiritual gifts. Some, there are many that have dreams, and they receive, insights and impressions in dreams. And so I think that's really interesting. We talk a lot inside of our heads. I didn't even know I did it until I was in college, and my best friend said, listen to what you say in your mind. She was into personal development. She was, the number one salesperson, and she was just amazing. And I said, wait, what? She said, just listen to what you say. And say positive things up there. I didn't even know I talked. And then all of a sudden I heard all this chatter, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I am talking all the time up there. And so I started listening. And instead of saying, I can't believe that I didn't get over that quicker, I should be getting over that quicker, I started saying to myself, that's okay. You can take it as long as you need. And I'll tell you what, I wish somebody would have said that to me growing up. It just wrapped me in their arms and said, you can take as long as you need to get over this. Because when I say that to myself now, even today, as a grandma, and I say, and I'm escalated and I'm just feeling shame, and I usually one of my kids has to remind me to say that to myself. But when I remember to say it, either I read it in my tools or, somebody mentions it to me, and I say that to myself with meaning, I'm like, I get over it quicker, which is so ironic. You give me all the time in the world to deal with it. I deal with it faster because I don't feel the shame. And I feel like it's okay that I feel these things. We also are we're very appreciative of beauty in the world. We appreciate, art and music, and we'll see things like we see colors differently. They're very vivid for us. Our life is very vivid.
Yes.
And so we when we hear music, like I have songs that I hear that just bring me to tears, and I have songs that I hear that I feel very spiritually connected. Like I remember one of my favorite songs is "I Hope You Dance," and by Leanne Womack. And I don't know if any of you have heard that song, but when I hear that song, I am just filled with hope. I just rise above whatever the difficulties are that I'm dealing with, and I see things like. And so, songs. I have a playlist, and I love it when somebody sends me a song and they'll say, "Oh, this song reminded me of you," and I. So I do. I feel things, very keenly, but I am really picky when it comes to a mattress. My husband says I'm like the princess and the pea. We go somewhere to stay at a hotel. Oh my goodness, what a challenge staying at a hotel. And he'll say, try both beds, see which side is the softest, and a pillow. We get all 8 pillows in the hotel room, lay on whichever one. It's so funny to me now, but I can't sleep with just on any pillow. So I was talking to somebody that is also an HSP, and he told me he packs his pillow in his carry-on and then he packs his suitcase. And I thought, wow, well, what an incredible idea. That's like too far off. But I recently went on a trip and I did that. And I loved having my own pillow.
Yes.
Like, Oh, I just felt so happy to have my own pillow. And so that's just one thing. Another thing that with me, I'm very keen on taste. Now, I'm a dietitian in my previous life, and so I love food. I just love food, and I love to taste food. And one of the things that I have a gift with is I can go to a restaurant and taste the food and discern
Oh,
the
yes.
spices
Yeah.
that they use. Then I
Yeah.
can come home and duplicate it, and that
Wow.
is so fun for me to say,
Yes.
oh, I made this, chicken tikka masala, because I'm not Indian and I don't have anybody in my family that is, and so. But I love the taste of it. And I was like, oh, I want to make that. So I made that dish for one of my friends that's a doctor. And he's from India. And I
Oh,
was just like,
wow.
oh, I hope he likes it. I hope it tastes good. And one spice I was missing from
What was that? Which spice?
it was fenugreek. I didn't have any. And they didn't have any at the store. And so I just made it without it. But anyway, he tasted it and he took one bite and he goes, chicken tikka masala. Oh, he said, so good, so good. And then his dad from India was visiting with him and he gave it to his dad and his dad was raving about it. And then he said, except you missed the fenugreek. And I started laughing. I thought, you're an HSP too. So anyway, it's a fun gift.
Yes.
But it can have a lot of challenges. So I'll tell
Of
you a funny
course.
story about a challenging moment with my husband and I. So when we got married, and he didn't really understand this about me, I had in mind this. I wanted to go to this bed and breakfast, and some of the places it was a little bit of an adventure. Some places we had a reservation, some places we did not. So we went to this hotel and I was so excited because I looked at it and I saw how beautiful it was. And it was right on the ocean. And I was just like, oh, I'm so excited to see this. So we went into the room and the room that I had hoped to get wasn't available. And so we got a different room and I was so disappointed. and my husband closed the door in the room and, we're looking out at the ocean and he was just confused. He was like, how could this room be so important to you? And he said, a room's a room. I mean, like, what difference does it make? And so he said, I'm going to have you close your eyes. He didn't blindfold me, but he said, just keep your eyes closed tight. And I want to just see how much you notice. We'd been in the room for 2 seconds. We went in the room, opened the door, closed the door, and I was sitting on the bed. So I had my eyes closed and he said, what's on the nightstand on the far side of the room? And I said, there's some daisies and some roses and, ivy. He goes, okay. He goes, what's on the handle on the nightstand? And I said, well, it's a porcelain handle with silver. And he goes, interesting. He goes, what is on the doorknob on this side of the room? And I said, it's porcelain with pink roses. Anyway, he went through and he asked me all these questions, like 20 questions about things about the room. What was in the wallpaper? What was in the art over the this part of the room and that part of the room. I knew everything. And he sat me and he looked at me and he said, no wonder these things are so important to you because you notice all these things. And I was so grateful that he understood that. I mean, he was blown away. And he's told that story for years. We've been married, almost 40 years now. And he tells that story because he's like, I had no idea how important these things were to her and why things meant so much. But she appreciated the beauty so much. For me, it was just a room.
But you really experienced it. You experienced it.
But I did. I soaked it all in, and I just appreciated
Beautiful.
it.
Oh my gosh. Okay, Karen, I was like taking so many notes when we were talking because I was like, there's so much. Okay, so we got to unpack a little bit about this. Okay, so going back to the definition of an HSP. It seems you mentioned this idea of empath versus HSP, and they're different, but sometimes you can be both. So can you just kind of explore that a little bit? Because I definitely know that I'm an empath and the lines kind of get blurred between like, am I an HSP? Because I can definitely identify with some of that, but maybe not all. And then I wonder if maybe it's also a spectrum, if you will. Like, is there people that are a lot more HSP versus like a little bit? How does that work in your experience?
So it's very interesting about empaths. So empaths take on the energy of other people. That is one of the hallmark character traits. Empaths also are very sensitive to picking up on the emotions of other people. So like an HSP, an empath can detect that you're feeling something, but an empath takes it on. So if you are feeling tense about something, then I can start to feel tense. If you're feeling shame, then I can start to feel shame. An HSP doesn't always take on unless they're also an empath. So that's a key difference between the two.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
Wow. Okay.
So one of the things that I don't know if I mentioned this statistic yet, but 30% of HSPs identify as extroverts and 70% identify as introverts. And so even within the personality itself, extroverts may perceive things differently than an introvert does, or may interpret things differently. So there's a lot of variation within it. So they don't call it a spectrum, but I think that because of all the other personality traits and different nuances and things, it is similar, as far as like you could be more sensitive or less sensitive. If you're an empath and an HSP, you are really, really sensitive. So yeah.
You got to protect your energy. You got to do so much to just shield yourself, right?
Oh my goodness. Exactly. Exactly. And so, yeah, we'll get into that, in a little bit about what we need to do as HSPs.
100%.
It can be draining. And so yes, we do have to protect ourselves.
And okay, so you mentioned this idea of it's a blessing, and it goes to be a challenge. This idea of kind of replaying beautiful memories in your mind and reliving those, but then also sometimes if it's a little bit of a negative emotion, it can be you can experience the same feelings, whether that's fear, anxiety, stress. And so you talked about emotional regulation. And then you, I think, then explained that you learned to let go of shame. And that was a way for you to emotionally regulate. And is that one of the techniques, like letting go of shame, that you have found to help yourself? Are there other practices?
Oh, yes, there's many, many more practices. And before I let go of shame, I can't let go of shame until I am able to emotionally regulate my nervous system. So you could tell me 25 times, remind me that I need to let go of shame. I know how to do it now, but I can't do it until I am able to emotionally regulate. So first I have to use those skills. And even those skills, I can't remember many times when I'm so escalated. But I have a list of little mantras that I use, and I have little scenarios that I've written in my phone. Remember this when this happens. Remember this experience, because some experiences have been so insightful for me, and they're general enough that I can apply them to different situations that I know are probably going to come up with people in my life. And then I can, and so for many years, I would read that list 3 times a day. And I would remind myself, okay, remember this. And I remember having some very difficult conversations at one point in time. And life was just extremely stressful. And so things were just very difficult. And I was having a hard time remembering these tools. I couldn't even remember them. I just would forget. And then I would, I would feel like the other person was unloving, and I would feel like they didn't love me. And so I started to feel unlovable. And I thought, that's not true. I know I'm a loving person. So I know I'm lovable, but they're not being loving. So then I felt this angst, when these situations would come up. And so I remember after I would, calm down, and I would remember, I'd go back and read my list. I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to do that. Oh yeah. And I would be frustrated with myself. And I remember thinking, it's interesting. I can't remember that at the time, but I was in amygdala hijack. We know that we go to the primitive part of our brain, and people have different terms that they use for that. But at those points in time, I cannot get to my prefrontal cortex. It is like almost impossible. Well, I didn't know that many years. I just thought, what's wrong with me? Heaven's sakes, I'm a life coach. I should be able to remember these things. So I had a lot of judgment about myself that I should live to a higher standard. but I'm human. and my emotions are escalated and I just can't remember. So I would read my thing and I would say, okay, that's what I'm going to do next time this thing comes up. Well, what happened was I started shortening the gap. So the stimulus would happen. There would be the time for the response, and it got shorter and shorter and shorter. And I would be quicker to de-escalate and remember my tools. Well, I remember the time it happened in a matter of, it was probably less than a minute. And I was like, wow, just won the gold medal. I was like, I did it. And I was telling one of my friends about this because I had told her for years about my journey. And I said, I feel like I've been potty training. I said, I'm like, okay, the toilet's over there. I feel this sensation. I know I need to get there, but I can't remember it. And I just dribble, and then I get closer to the toilet, but I'm dribbling on the way there. And then I actually sit on the toilet and the timing is right.
Amazing.
And my brain connects it. So for any of us that are mothers, that was how I felt about myself. I felt like, and when I can't even tell you the joy in my heart. I was like, okay, it's possible but I have to get that neural pathway activated. For me, I have to read that list frequently. And I still read that list and I still practice that. I do mirror work. So yeah, we can go into a lot of the things that I do that and help, but I don't know if you want to talk more about like children or about relationships.
Oh, well, we have EnvisionAir questions for you that talk about both. And so we'll definitely dive into this, but honestly, that's really, really interesting. I think the how to emotionally regulate high level kind of your tips will be so interesting and insightful. I mean, I don't know if I am an HSP. Like, I don't know. I think I'm more of an empath than I am HSP per se, but who knows? But I definitely feel like that is such an important component, I think, for anyone listening who identifies an HSP, because I have friends, I have people in my close circle who I definitely feel are HSPs. And I think sometimes it's been not having the knowledge of one, identifying as an HSP and actually understanding, I'm not overreacting all the time. It's actually, there's a reason why my reactions are. It's not just because I'm too sensitive or, whatever the narrative that has been given to them. And so I think this will be real. Let's definitely do a deep dive into that.
You want me to ask the questions to help people know if they are an HSP?
Oh, yes, please. This is the list we were talking about, right?
Yeah. So this is one list. There's two. Dr. Aron has one, and then this other one is worded just a little differently. So I thought people might appreciate this. So I'll just tell the characteristics, and then I'll tell a little bit more, after that. So how do you know if you're an HSP? You're extremely empathetic. So as I mentioned, empathy is something that we pick up on because the empathy is different than an empath. So an empath feels the feelings of another person and takes those on.
Yes.
Empathy is where I can relate to you and understand your situation as if I were you. So I put myself in your situation and see it through your eyes the best I can. I'm not you, but I try to imagine that I am you. We have vivid imaginations as HSPs. So it is a little easier for us to try and put ourselves, in your shoes.
Yeah.
Do you cherish reflection? Are you one that likes to have time to just kind of process and think and our memory is important to you? I love pictures. Pictures are so important to me. In fact, if we don't get one, I am so sad. You have heard, don't take things so personally a lot during your life. You may freeze under pressure. And this is an interesting thing because we want to make sure that we understand all the data and the input that's coming at us. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes when somebody wants us to make a decision right like that, we can freeze because we're like, wait, I don't know what this all means yet. And so it's not like freezing can be a trauma response. It can also be a response to not being ready and to feeling like somebody is trying to extract something from us that we haven't even put all the pieces together. We're at home inside of our head. And so we like thinking things like I like the, I think happy thoughts up there. and like I said, songs, and different things. However, we can have a tough time with the negative feedback. We feel it so deeply that it's not just like, oh, well, the house is a mess. And we don't just say, well, yeah, I had a bad day, or, the kids were sick. We kind of internalize that and think, oh, well, maybe they don't, appreciate all that I'm doing, or may take it as far as our identity. Oh, well, I'm a bad, whatever, fill in the blank, because that person criticized or even gave me corrective criticism or feedback. Because I had a lot of people say to me, I'm just giving you corrective criticism.
Yes.
Well, I work so much better if somebody helps me to see the vision and to point out how I'm getting there. Boy, you point out how I'm moving in that direction, and man, I just want to move even faster and get there. Versus if you tell me the things I'm doing wrong, because I start to focus on that. So that's something I've had to work on. We're very deliberate in the way that we make decisions. So this is a funny one. When I buy things at the store, like clothes, I often don't take the tags off because I'm still not quite sure if I just love it. And my husband calls me Minnie Pearl. Now, many of your audience will not know who Minnie Pearl is, but she was a character on Hee Haw, and you probably don't know what Hee Haw is either. But anyway, she always had tags on her hat and her clothes and things. And my husband just thinks it is hysterical. He's like, just take the tag off. And I'm like, no, I might want it. I might want to return that. Joke in our house, but I want to look in the mirror just a little bit more and make the lighting match it to my other clothes, whatever it is. But I'm also deliberate about lots of decisions. I am the best researcher because I want to find out all the factors. I think about consequences a lot, like what is going to happen down the road. And so a lot of times I can be slower to make decisions because I need time to do that research.
Yeah.
I love to interview people and I love to ask them. So when I am trying to make a decision, I ask lots of people, and people misinterpret that. They're like, well, you don't have a sense of self because you're asking everybody else for their advice. And I said, no, that's not true. No. I want to know what they think. Then I want to know why they think it. And then if my criteria matches their criteria, then I think, oh, well, we might have some validity where we match. But if it doesn't, then I say, no, they think about that because of that. That's not the way I think about it. That doesn't fit for me. But I learn so much about their thought processes. And so I love to, when I'm making decisions. We, as HSPs, you're on top of the details. Wow. I mean, you put an HSP on a job, they are so innovative. They are able to make connections with people. I mean, they are incredible, employees. Yeah. They're committed to fairness because they see both sides of the picture.
Right.
They have a knack for leading people in teams because they pick up on these things. HSPs exude kindness because we're so aware. We don't want someone to suffer. And that is the goal of why I became a life coach, because all of these things that I learned, I thought, I wish I would have known this before. I wish I would have known this as a child. I wish I would have known all these things. And when I learn something, I can't wait to teach somebody else so that they don't suffer like I have. That is what motivates me every day. HSPs are amazing problem solvers because we're so creative and we remember things from whatever.
Yes.
Rolodex we have in there. We notice what others miss. And so after the cleaning lady leaves, you might see the hair, in there, or you might feel the hair on your skin that other people don't even notice, And so we are just amazing noticers. We notice when things change, like the game, one of these things is not like the other. Boy, we noticed that right away. Whoa, what's going on here? We have a year's supply of tissues. This has been another thing that's kind of funny to me. Like when the AT&T commercials would come on or the cotton commercials would come on, I just start to cry because I'm just so touched by these things. I cry at airports because I see people coming off the plane and their families greeting them. And it reminds me of being born and how the family is just so excited when this baby comes and they just wrap their arms around them and they just are so full of joy. And then when people are departing on the airplane and the family's waving goodbye, it reminds me of death and how they're moving on to another sphere. So emotional at course. I get emotional just telling you about it.
Yeah, I feel it. I feel it. So maybe I'm in it. I don't know. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah. So
I feel it.
Got my, my tissues here. Because of all the stimuli that we pick up on, like at work, I hear people talking and I get distracted. Oh my goodness. It's so hard for me when I'm working in an environment with lots of things going on. And at an airport, when I'm trying to work while I'm waiting for my flight and I'm not paying attention to all of the hellos and goodbyes, when I get to my gate and that's not going on as much. I get distracted because I just start to, I hear things, I feel things, and so working at home is very beneficial for a lot of HSPs because we can control the environment, we can control the temperature. Oh my goodness, it was so hard for me when I worked with somebody and she wanted it to be 80 degrees in the office. And I was like, that's just so, I've always been I like cool temperatures and even before I was a grandma. And we seek meaning and purpose. Oh my goodness. I mean, all of us are meaning making machines, but as an HSP, it's even more so. So if those things resonate with you, you may be an HSP.
Wow. This is fantastic. Where does this list come from? Is this a list that you've created or is this a list that has come about?
This is the list that another therapist created.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay. Well, it's fascinating.
I can send it to you. But the other physiological thing that I think is so interesting is, have you heard about mirror neurons?
No. What are mirror neurons?
Yes, neuroscience is so fascinating. So, they've done these studies on. They started with monkeys, and I don't know if that was the very first thing, but anyway, one of the studies that I read was about the monkeys, and if you're a monkey and you're eating a banana, and I'm a monkey and I'm watching you eat the banana, parts of my brain are activated that are mirror neurons. And so I can think of when I ate a banana, I might even sense the taste. I might remember the taste, the sweetness, whatever it is. I have a mirror neuron. Now, mothers and babies have mirror neurons. Babies can pick up on mothers and things like that. So mirror neurons are absolutely fascinating. But HSPs their mirror neurons fire so much more. Their brain just lights up with these mirror neurons. And so it is a physiological thing. So that's why when I see, like you mentioned, a violent movie, we can't watch anything that is intense. My husband always says we have to go to the movies in the morning with you because you have to have more input to de-escalate from the thing. I mean, I become the person in the movie. I feel it. I mean, he touches me if it's a scary thing and I scream, because I am so engrossed in what's going on. So I don't watch violent movies at all, but sometimes I watch an intense movie. I mean, the emotion is just so intense. And so I have to be very careful about that because my mirror neurons are just firing like crazy.
That's so interesting because I cannot watch true crime. Oh my God. But I start I start thinking about like, if, for example, I've told my girlfriends this, so it's a story, but I say like, because they love true crime. And I'm like, if I watch true crime and like, it's about the best friend, like killing the friend to be with the husband, I'm going to start looking at you in a different way. I cannot separate. I'm like, oh my gosh, what if that person does that to me? So that's very interesting that I don't know, maybe there's that, true crime. I can't watch it that either. So anyway,
I totally understand. But when I found out about that, how that blood flow increased and they could actually detect it on magnetic, functional magnetic resonance imaging, I was just like, oh my word, this is so real. So it's a personality trait that is physiologically detected.
Yeah. And I really also, what I think you mentioned earlier about this idea of the blood flow, right? And how HSPs will experience like a higher level of blood flow. And that's really, really fascinating. But one of the questions I have then is about whether this is an inherited personality trait. Do you know about that? Because I think that's not like I read.
They think that there is a genetic component to it. So I believe that that's true.
Yeah. And how much do you think in your experience, it's not really then about trying to rewire that sort of personality trait. Is it more about managing it in your experience?
I do think there is some rewiring in the brain that goes on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so not in a negative way, but because we default to the negative, if we will, for example, gratitude has the power to rewire our brain, and
Mm-hmm.
it can actually increase serotonin in our brain. So a lot of HSPs, because they feel things so keenly and because our brain naturally defaults to negative, they can have more issues with anxiety and depression.
Mm.
So it doesn't mean that anything is wrong. It just is because we feel it so keenly. The other part of that that is so interesting is that many HSPs are unsupported in their personality. And so their caregivers may not understand their, the siblings may look at them like, what is going on with you? I was there too. That's not what happened. But they feel it so keenly, and
Wow.
they may misinterpret things. I misinterpreted things. That look, I thought they don't like me. But it wasn't that they didn't like me. It was that something was going on with them. And when I learned it had more to do with them than it did with me, that was so freeing. And then when I was able to learn skills of empathy toward them and think, I wonder what they're going through, instead of thinking, oh, they don't like me. That was a game changer for me, because you would think, being so sensitive and being an empath, I
Mm-hmm.
would have empathy. But many times they, like if somebody yelled at me, this is another interesting thing. Like an HSP feels it like an electric current through their body. It's not just that it hurts my feelings. It physiologically, I feel like, as I have touched an electric current, so I know what that feels like. And it feels like that from my head to my toe. And I'll even start to sweat. And so I I have a different reaction when somebody is yelling at me. I don't automatically think, wonder what's going on with them over there. I think, I got to protect myself, because
Yes.
this would be dangerous to me. And sometimes it hurts. And I oftentimes, pull back because it hurts so
Mm.
much, until I can, like I said, regulate my emotions and gain perspective on the whole thing. So that has been a journey. That's been the journey of my lifetime. But as I use empathy and say, I wonder what's going on with him. And I really listen and I say, tell me more. Tell me more
Mm.
why you feel that way. Then that changes the whole dynamic.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's really, as in, like, I'm writing it down, and it all kind of is making sense in some ways. And we're going to dive into how to emotionally regulate even further. But it seems like being able to empathize and let go of shame, those are things that I've written down. And maybe also this element of gratitude as well, because I did listen to your episode on the science of gratitude, which was really fascinating. And I know you talked about that and how that can help with the rewiring and the neuroplasticity. So, right. Well, before we move into that specific area, I just wanted to know, your husband, he's not an HSP then?
He's not an HSP. He is sensitive, but he's in different ways. In
Right.
very,
Okay.
like, he can't stand the tags. Tags are not a big issue for me, but he can't stand tags. So it's interesting how he has
Interesting.
sensitive traits. I would not call him an HSP,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but yeah, he does. And so, but my my HSP maybe is more intense. I don't know what it is, but
Mm-hmm.
my quality traits have been baffling to lots of people in my life.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to, if that's okay, we just to kind of explore
Yes.
a little bit about how has the interpersonal relationships been throughout your life, particularly obviously as a spouse. That's something that's probably really fascinating if we have listeners who are either themselves an HSP and their partner is not, or vice versa. How has that been for you? And what advice would you give to people who have a spouse as an HSP?
Yes. So, first of all, if I were coaching you and you had a spouse that wasn't an HSP and you were, I would first help you to understand all the things about yourself. I would help you to understand how your brain works, how you process things, and how physiologically you are different, and the gifts that come with that. I would help you see how you can pick up on things, and I would help you see the skills that you have developed and honed over the years that could serve you so well. I would also help you see that some of the things that you may have heard, such as you're too sensitive, or are you ever going to get over that, or whatever it might be, Many of those statements we've heard over and over and over again, not always from the same person. It could be from a variety of people. Well, then that makes it even worse because it's not just, well, my Aunt Sally is just, negative. It's like, well, if that many people say that to me, then there must be something wrong with me. And so I would help you see the beauty in your personality. And I would help you with your self-esteem because our self-esteem can really suffer when we hear those things. So many times we start to believe them, and it's almost like it becomes a belief. It's not just a thought. Oh, I'm too sensitive. It's a belief. When we have a thought that is repeated over and over again, it becomes a belief. So I would dig deeper to find out what are those limiting beliefs that hold you back, that limit you in your ability to interact with other people. And then I would help you to have skills to develop empathy. So the other thing that I would do is if I were dealing with your partner, I would help them to understand and show them the studies, the science of the whole thing so that they could see it's not just like sometimes people are like, gosh, you're such a baby, or they'll use terms that are just derogatory because they don't understand, or they may even be doing it as a protective way, to protect you, but the message doesn't come across in a positive way. So I would flip it and I would help you the positive things. And I would flip it for the other person so that they could see, do you recognize how Nicole has this gift to be in tune when you're hurting and you feel safe to be able to share your feelings with her because you don't feel judgment? Have you noticed how she's so fair that she doesn't, just automatically take one side without considering the other side or whatever it was? I would point out and help the other person to maybe go back in their memory. And if they couldn't think of one, then I'd have you help me think of one. Remember when, and I would, and if there was a difficult situation, I would dissect that and say, okay, let's back up. Let's go through what happened. What was going on in Nicole's mind? What was going on in your partner's mind? How did you see it? How did you interpret it? And then what happened? What did you do as a result? And what were the implications? What was the impact of that? If you told me that I was too sensitive and I felt shame, maybe I didn't want to share with you because I thought I've heard that enough. I know what they're going to say. I don't need to share that with them. Maybe I start to feel distant from you. Maybe I start to feel isolated. Maybe I start to protect in other ways and not be as connected emotionally with you. And so I help people to unravel all of the things and then say, okay, what can we do do we want to be connected? If we want to be connected, what can we do to get to connection? How can we support the person? So if I was talking to you and you felt unsupported in your relationship, I would say, what would help you to feel supported? Now, this is a foreign concept because HSPs are often so in tune with other people's feelings. Because they've been told that there's something wrong with them, in other words, most people don't say there's something wrong with you, but they insinuate it. And so because we feel that way, we can not pay attention to our emotions. We can start to smash those things down and say, not going to go there, not going to, and we may not even notice it in our body. We may not notice these things that are coming up from us. And so I would help you to do that. And then I would help the other person to help support you if they could, if they wanted to. Now, sometimes in a partnership, the other person doesn't want to. They're like, or maybe they don't have the skill. Maybe they don't have the ability. Maybe they've got so much stress going on in their life, or they've had trauma and they aren't able to do that. Many times when an HSP is dealing with somebody that has trauma, the person that has trauma can misinterpret it and think they're blaming me. They're crying and it's my fault. They automatically would think they're watching the AT&T commercial and they're crying. What did I do? What did I say? Did I do something wrong? And when you live with an HSP and you don't have these skills, you may think that. And then you may think, I didn't do anything. I just came home. I was happy. Why is she crying? And so then a person that doesn't have the skill could get annoyed and could get angry. And because they may be misinterpreting it and taking it personally. So, and they may feel helpless. This is the other thing that so many people in an HSP's life feel is helpless. I don't know what to do for this person that's so sensitive. I don't know how to help them. And so that can cause annoyance. in me if I don't have the skills to know how to deal with that. So if I were helping you, I would say, did you know that if you just are with Nicole, that can help her? That if you just be with her in her emotion, whatever she's feeling, and accept that it's okay that she feels that way, if you just give her space and a loving energy. So I've had people in my life that have come and just sat by me. They didn't even say anything. They didn't even do anything. They just sat by me and they looked at me like they cared about me. And I was so supported. I felt so loved in that moment. And it's been so interesting to teach this to other people, because you're like, wait, what? I don't have to know what to say. I don't even have to know what to do. No, you don't. Offering that support can make all the difference in the world for an HSP, because many times we have not had that support. So that's the most important thing that I would do. What other questions do you have?
I mean, that's incredible. Well, okay. So did you and your husband have been married for 40 years, which is amazing. So congratulations. That's so beautiful. He's not an HSP. He's sensitive, but he's not an HSP. So like, how was that to discovering your own journey with HSP and discovering how to emotionally regulate yourself and your own like sort of unraveling of that? And then how did your husband support you, and kind of how did that work together over 40 years?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is it's still a work in progress. And my husband used to say, argument number 25, because we would see the same pattern. And so we try to use humor because sometimes, my husband is wickedly funny. He just has the best sense of humor, and he can imitate things. He could be a comedian. He is so funny. And so, but sometimes it's not funny.
Right.
So, we've had to be careful, and I've had to tell him that's really not funny. And my husband is sarcastic, and that is very difficult for me. As when I first met him, I'd never heard sarcasm. I know that is hard to believe. My parents were not sarcastic. They were direct. They would just say, why didn't you make your bed? Or I don't like it when you do that. We just directly, And so I had never had someone say to me something like, well, you think that you forgot how to make the bed? I never heard that. So that's kind of funny, because it's so common now. I see how common sarcasm is, but a lot of people use sarcasm to shield what they really mean in a quote, quote, humorous way. And there's often a dig in there. So when I would hear my husband say sarcasm, first it stunned me, because I thought if you were sarcastic with me, you must hate me. What an ironic thing. Swearing. My husband swears. I didn't grow up with swearing. I didn't ever hear swearing. And I think maybe my dad said damn once. I can't even remember when he did. So I really cannot remember that. And my husband grew up working with cattle, and they swore at the cattle all the time. And so swear words were like no big deal. So the first time he swore at me, I just burst into tears. And he was just, what? What? I just said the color is red. What? And so those two things were the very first things that we had to recognize, because it just came out of his mouth without thinking.
Yeah,
both.
Of course.
He's so intelligent, and he's so quick. He processes information really fast. So we're total opposites in that way. I think and process and, correlate with my Rolodex, and everything. And he's just like, boom. He should have been a lawyer. He is so fast on his feet. So we've had to say, take a minute there, and so now, and the other thing that was really hard for him was he would work really hard to bite his tongue and not say something that he thought. Like say it was like, sarcastic thing. And, but I was so in tune with him that I knew what he was thinking. And I would say, I know you're thinking. And I would tell him what he was thinking. And he would look at me and he would say, no, I'm not. Because he didn't want me to know. And he didn't want to hurt my feelings. And I would say, yes, you are. And he would say, no, I didn't think that. And I'd say, yes, you did. And he finally would say, okay, I did. Don't give me credit for not saying it. So when he said, don't I get any credit for not saying it? I said, got a really good point there. I should be grateful that you didn't say it, because I wasn't grateful that he didn't say it. I was annoyed and unhappy and hurt that he thought it. I was like, wait, why are you even thinking that? So I had to work on myself too. You know, I mean, it was, and I had to recognize that when he swore, I didn't think so. Now we have the biggest joke. So like I was talking to him the other day and I said, this swearing thing, this does not make any sense to me. I mean, if you say go to hell, that makes sense because hell is a location. But if you, you're damn right, well, what's that mean? I mean, damn is like, to, thwart progress. That makes no sense. Or damn straight. I mean, so we have the funniest thing. He goes, honey, you need swearing lessons. Just don't know how to use swear words. Such a funny joke in our family, but it didn't used to be funny. And so, so we have made a lot of progress, but we've had to, like a lot of times we've been to therapy. Our therapist didn't understand me either. And so, well, a lot of this had to come by reading and learning and then finding, resources.
Yes.
To help us individually. And so, I've also had trauma in my background, and most of us have. My husband has too, and so we had to then learn how to deal with our trauma. So now, the other day, we do this a lot. But the other day, my husband and I had something that happened, and we had a little moment of angst, and then he just paused for a minute, and I paused for a minute, and we both thought about it, and something happened. I can't remember. We saw the other person's point of view, and he said, look at how fast we are. He said, in years past, that would have taken a lot longer to deal with that. And we hugged and, we were like, great. Isn't progress great? And we celebrate. We do. My husband and I, we celebrate our progress within each other and within our relationship, because
beautiful.
When he sees that something's difficult for me and I do process it quicker and I emotionally regulate, he is just so happy. He's just like, look at you. This is amazing, And so I work to apply all of the life coach things, in my own life.
100%. Yeah. So, at what age did you actually realize what an HSP was or identify with that to get that sort of self-awareness with regards to how you're experiencing life? Was that before you met your husband or was that during the relationship?
It was during my relationship.
Wow.
It was in the 80s. It was in the 80s that I first heard that term. Now, I had been told I was too sensitive all my life, so I knew I was sensitive. Everybody knew I was sensitive, but the actual traits, I did not know that it was a personality trait. I felt like it was.
Right.
I felt like, and because my dad had said that I had these other gifts not connected to the word sensitive, I knew I had gifts, but anyway, I didn't understand. And I certainly didn't understand any of the neuroscience behind it. That was much later.
Yeah.
And so that has just been absolutely fascinating. I love neuroscience.
Yeah, it is. I agree. I just only recently gotten into it, probably with like following the works of Joe Dispenza and Bob Lipton? Is that Lipton? Can't remember his first name, but he's Bruce Lipton. Yeah, he's also extraordinary in that world. The neuroscience, so fascinating. So when you navigate, obviously you are a life coach and you worked as a dietitian before, and you have this thriving coaching practice. So as an entrepreneur in the space and kind of more in your public persona, how do you navigate life in like the public sphere, if you will, as an HSP? Because that can be really, as an entrepreneur, there's a lot more, challenges. You can face rejection. You can face a lot of different things. So what are some things that you've discovered that have helped you to navigate that?
Yeah, so this is very interesting. So I started my entrepreneurial journey as a girl. I started selling newspapers when I was, 9 years old, and I always had jobs because I paid for college on my own. So I had to buy a car. I had to buy my own car. So I was earning money, to do all those things. And then my husband and I have owned businesses, and so he told me, you're going to be in charge of sales and marketing, and I'm like, me? Okay. And so I started going to meet people. Well, it served me so well because I picked up on little nuances, and I would come back and say, oh, this person has this thing. Now, it was a little scary. And so I had to get out of myself. And that's one of the things that an HSP has to do, is to learn to not just, coon. And so now an introvert, this is definitely more challenging than it is for an extrovert. As an extroverted HSP, this is a little easier because I go into a situation as an entrepreneur thinking, wonder what friend I'm going to make today. Wonder what interesting conversation I'm going to have today. And so I was just recently at an event where I had to network with a ton of people. And people ask me, how do you do that? Because I when I coach people that are entrepreneurs, they're like, I feel nervous to talk to people. And I'm like, well, what are you nervous about? So we go to what their thoughts are and how they deal with it. So I've told them, can you think of it like I might make a new friend at this door or at this event or at this, table or whatever, whoever I'm talking to. If you think of it like that with a positive expectancy, there's a different energy that comes across. If I think about what can I do for you? How could I support you? How could I meet your needs versus how can I get you to buy from me? How can I get you to work with me? That's a take energy. That's a desperate kind of energy. And everybody can sense that. And it's like kind of just that icky sales feeling, we don't want to have anything to do with that. But if you really care about me, if that is conveyed, what a difference that makes. And when I feel that from someone, I'm like putty. And so when I can use empathy to think of the situation from the other person's point of view, and I can try to meet their needs and I can relate to them, we have a different conversation. Then it's, how can I serve you? How can I help you?
Yeah.
And then if what I have is a match for you, great. If it's not, no problem, because there's a lot of other people. And I believe that there's enough for all of us to go around. So I'm not threatened if you're doing the same thing as I am either, because your style still may be different. Your people may be different. Something about me may resonate with them. Something about you may resonate with other people. So I'm like, let's celebrate. Let's work together, because, it's not like there's only 2 pieces of the pie left and I'm not going to get one. It's like there's all the pie that we all need. And so that makes a huge difference as far as an HSP getting out there and having the courage to be an entrepreneur, because it is a scary world as an entrepreneur. The other thing is it can be lonely because as an entrepreneur, a lot of times you're setting goals and you're dealing with things on your own. You're not getting feedback. It's not like you get a paycheck on a regular basis. You don't get an evaluation from your boss. Sometimes we can be mean to ourselves as an entrepreneur. Oh, I should have, captured whatever, by such and such a time. But if we just think, I have all the time in the world, if we are just loving to ourselves and show that same love, that has been so huge for me, is having self-love.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I didn't learn, somebody didn't sit me down and say, you need to have self-love for yourself. I saw some of that modeled, in my family, but I also saw a lot of giving. And so that is what comes more naturally. And so I do have to actually be conscious of giving to myself and giving love to myself. Sometimes I think, I wish that person would have said this, when that thing happened, when my feelings were hurt. I wish they would have said this. And then I remember one time when I was in college, I was telling my mom this, and she said, well, why don't you be your own best friend? And I'm like, she sent me this article about how to be your own best friend. And the article said, what would you say to someone else that was hurting? Well, wow, I have a whole bunch of things that I could say to you if you're hurting. And then it said, do you say that to yourself? And I thought, I don't. And when I was a little girl, I used to do mirror work. I didn't even know I was doing mirror work, but I used to talk to myself in the mirror. And I would give myself pep talks. And I would, I'm very animated when I talk. So I would just, say, how are you feeling? And I would talk to myself about my feelings. I didn't even know I was doing mirror work. I had no idea that I was activating mirror neurons to feel cared about and loved. I mean, it's kind of embarrassing to admit that I did that as a little girl, but I did. And now I still do mirror work. And when I learned things that I could say to myself in the mirror and look in the mirror and say, I love you. And say it like I really mean it, not like, I love you, check, done. But feel it, because I can feel things, and look in my eyes. And don't get too close to the mirror. They say that we should be 6 feet away. I don't know. Sometimes with my vision, I have to get closer. but really look into my eyes and really feel it and say it again and again and again.
Interesting.
And so not just once. And then I say lots of things that I love about myself. Because guess what? I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm thinking. Somebody else missed it. They might not even pay attention to the details. So another practice that I have with gratitude is I'll write the things that I'm grateful for. And I was keeping track on my phone. I had like when I felt like I received a miracle, or a moment of grace, I would write it down and I would be like, oh my gosh, what a blessing. I didn't lock my keys in the car. Whereas somebody else might just be like, well, that didn't happen. On to the next thing. I would celebrate that. And then I would write about it in my nightly practice. And that gratitude, I start my day with gratitude. I end my day with gratitude. I try to be grateful all during the day. And then I try to write these things, specific things down, because sometimes things are so nuanced. And I'm like, that could have gone so differently. Well, I am so grateful that happened, that I picked up on that thing. And that the other person, responded in that way. I have so many things to celebrate and be grateful for. And then, like I said, because I have a journal and I go back and I read that again, I'm filled with joy again. And so it elevates my not only my consciousness, my emotions. And so amazingly, that has helped me to heal from the trauma that I have experienced. And it has helped me to raise my self-esteem, because I start to see these things. And so if somebody else doesn't say it to me, I say it to myself. I love to hear it from other people. I love validation. It is just like, it's like, salve on a wound. But if I don't get it from somebody else, then I want to give it.
Beautiful. That's so nice. So I was just taking some notes. So I heard it's mindset, starts with mindset, first of all, getting into the right mindset when you're dealing with people, obviously a very generous spirit, going in with like a generous spirit. Then it's also a mix of self-compassion and self-love and gratitude. Feels like those are big things that you cultivate in your everyday life that help you navigate the world of entrepreneurship, which is probably very, difficult sometimes.
Yes, and mindfulness. So being aware, because
mindfulness.
Being aware of my own emotions. And because I pick up on things so quick, when I practice mindfulness, because that's another part of my morning practice is prayer and mindfulness, then I can recognize, like, just starting to feel that something's off. Something's off. Well, then I can do something about it if I recognize it, or if I'm feeling like something's off, I can say, this situation is not a match for me, and I need to correct, in a different way. Enthusiasm is a really big key for me. When I feel enthusiasm, I feel like, oh, I'm in the right direction. When I don't feel enthusiasm or less enthusiasm, it's like the hot and cold game. I'm like getting colder. Okay, we'll need to redirect. But that mindfulness helps me to learn acceptance for myself, acceptance for what is going on, acceptance for other, and to remove blocks to love. So that's another thing that I help people do. We often have judgment. So if we remove the judgment, then that love can flow back and forth.
100%. Yes. Okay. So now let's get that question keeps coming up, the how to emotionally regulate. So can you give the listeners maybe a little short step-by-step process of how maybe a little strategy that you use to emotionally regulate?
Yes. So the first thing that happens with me is I'm usually stunned. And I usually say, I don't know if any other HSPs say this, but I say, I can't believe that whatever thing happened. And so that's my go-to every single time. Well, I didn't even know this was a pattern in me, but I was talking to my life coach, and I was telling her this, and she kept hearing me say this over and over again. My next thing that I say is, why did that happen? What is going on here? And she said to me, do you realize the problem-solving skills that you are using to emotionally regulate yourself? And I said, no, I didn't know that was a pattern, and I didn't know it was even serving me. I thought I was just baffled. And so when I recognize that, so now when I hear myself say, can't believe that happened. What is going on here? I'm like, bingo, bingo. Okay, then I go through my little list. Those trigger me, not always, but I'm faster. That gap between the stimulus and the response is shorter, where I remember, okay, let's go. Sometimes I go straight to my phone. Okay, let's read on my phone. What do I need to do? But the first thing that I know when I say that is, what is going on with that other person? How my goal is to seek to understand them first, and then seek to be understood. I had it all backwards for so many years, and I remember in the 80s, I read this book by Stephen R. Covey, and he said that is the problem with relationships. So if things are escalating, I have to be mindful. I have to be aware. When I recognize that question that comes to my mind and I'm stunned, I have to do something. Many times I pause because I'm trying to make sense of it, and I take a minute. Sometimes I go, if the emotions are really intense, sometimes I go to the other room. I might have to go to the bathroom, or sometimes I go look in the mirror, and I'll talk to myself, and I'll tell myself something, and because sometimes the emotions just, whew, I mean, I can go so fast that I have to go and show myself some love. Sometimes I hug myself. I will put my arms around myself. There's a technique called havening where you can stroke your arms like this, and this helps to regulate your nervous system. I'm a very touchy person. Touch is so important to me. Connection is so important. Emotional connection, talking, I love it all. And so, but as I hug myself,
yes,
that helps me to feel safe. And that helps me to know that it's okay. I can take a moment to think about how the other person is feeling, because there's a fear involved in most of us. Our ego says, whoa, wait, what do you mean we're going to think about what they're thinking? What about what I'm feeling? My emotions are very important. I need to help them understand me, because then we could get rid of this problem. If they just understood, I didn't mean to hurt their feelings, I didn't mean anything ill by what I did, we could solve this problem. But that's not how it works in real life. So I have to work on that ego every single day. And when I can feel safe, that it's okay if I seek to understand you first, and I show that I care about you first, in time, we can deal with me. This is so foreign because it requires not focusing on myself. It requires me looking outside of myself. And so as I do that with the other person, amazingly, their defenses decrease. Their emotions start to regulate.
Wow.
Their mirror neurons start to fire as they see me calm, as they see me regulating myself. They start to regulate themselves. And so that's so fascinating to me. And that happens with children. We can do the same thing. As we model regulating ourselves, we teach our children how to regulate themselves. We help everyone that we interact with as we regulate, to help them regulate. So if you don't feel like I'm a threat because I want to know about you, I care about you, then you feel safe. And then you can be honest with me. You can say, well, I thought you meant this.
Yes.
Then I can say, oh, I understand why you would think that. I felt that way before when somebody did that. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. And I can see why you would think that. Then I even have the ability to validate you. And if you feel valid, that I understand why what I did would affect you that way. And even if I can't understand it, let's say it's so foreign that it makes no sense to me, I can still validate your feelings. I can say, oh, I have felt fear before too. I know how awful that feels. I'm so sorry. I am sorry, no matter what you feel, even if I think that I didn't have anything to do with it. If you had a trauma response that had nothing to do with me, I still am sorry that you had the trauma response. I'm still sorry that you're hurting. I care that you are hurting. Well, when you feel like I care and your defenses are down and you feel safe and you can be honest, what do you think is the next thing that happens usually?
Obviously opening up.
You open up and you usually reach to me. And you say, then you're able to hear all of your blocks to love start to come down. Now, it doesn't always happen overnight, doesn't always happen right in that moment. Sometimes it takes time, but it's an investment in trust in the relationship.
100%. Yeah.
And if I want greater trust, I could say, no, I don't want to hear what you have to say. No,
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what you have to say. I'm going to tell you what I have to say. Then I say, does that get me what I want? No, what I want is connection. I want connection more than anything. That is the most
interesting.
And so I can postpone. I can have delayed gratification of getting to tell my whole side of the story. And you know what? What's so ironic? Sometimes I don't even have to tell my side of the story, because when I hear what they think and how they feel, I'm like, well, that totally makes sense. No wonder they thought that.
Yeah.
It doesn't even matter, because it all makes sense now. And then then I can say, I care more about you than I do about my feelings at that moment. Not that I don't care about my feelings, but I care so much about you that I'm going to put you as a priority. Now, people get confused when they hear me say that, because they think, whoa, what do you mean? You don't care about your feelings? I do care about my feelings, and my feelings are extremely important to me. And I can validate myself. But if you don't have the skill or the ability or the composure to do that, then what is most important to me? What is most important is coming together, being unified, and building the relationship.
Beautiful. I love that. And that is so helpful, I think, especially with the relationships where it's like interpersonal. I have a question that came to my head. What happens if it's like a stranger? So let's say you feel like you've been wronged by a stranger. Let's say, for example, you're driving and someone like cuts you off, or I don't know, I'm thinking about that. Or we have an EnvisionAir question. They mentioned that sometimes like their partner, they'll be at a grocery store and someone bangs the cart, and there's a response from the person with the HSP spouse gets really upset, feels so deeply wronged by the person's thoughtlessness. But in that moment, those instances, you're strangers. So the stranger wronged the person who has HS. Like, how do you navigate that when you can't really communicate necessarily? That person's probably just gone and like living their life, doesn't even think of it again. But obviously that person has really been deeply affected by that. So how do we deal with that? That's a great way to start some of these EnvisionAir questions as well.
Yes, that's a great question, because so I'll do the traffic one, because that just happened to me.
Okay.
And so I was traffic was really busy, and I needed to move over to another lane. It was tight, but I could fit. So I put on my blinker. I moved over. Well, apparently the person behind me didn't think that I left enough room, or I don't know. I don't know what they thought. But as I got onto the freeway and I was driving along, they roared up behind me in their truck, and then they were just right behind me, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? Because I had no idea anything had happened. And then they came next to me and they flipped me off, and they were making all these angry faces. Well, I had that electrical shock go through my body, because I was like, whoa, what? I did the thing. I can't believe what's going on here. So then I recognized my little questions that I asked myself, and I felt bad. I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? And in other situations, I feel offended. Why would they do that to me? I didn't do anything to them. And sometimes I get my feelings hurt. Most of the time I get my feelings hurt. And so I had to say, it took me a minute, to breathe. My heart was pounding, because they were obviously furious at me. And then I thought, okay, what could they possibly be thinking? And I thought, maybe they were afraid I was going to hit their car, or maybe, I used my imagination to think, what could they possibly be thinking? And when I can't think of anything, like say I think of nothing, I can't think of a single thing they could be thinking, then I think, I'm sorry they are having a strong reaction, a negative reaction to that thing. And I wish them well. I sent him off with love, and I thought, I'm sorry. I know there's no time and space, in the world, and his spirit can hear my spirit, even if he's not next to me. So I just said I was sorry. I said, I'm sorry. And many times when I'm driving and things happen, my husband laughs, because I'm like, I'm sorry. I didn't see that person coming, or whatever, And so I do. I say I'm sorry, and then I wish them love. I think I didn't want to cause somebody harm, and so I just send a loving thought to them. Now, when my feelings are hurt, I can't do that immediately. I cannot do that. I cannot get to that point. That's a prefrontal cortex thought. Compassion is a prefrontal cortex thought and emotion. And so I have to move from my primitive part of my brain, from my amygdala here. That takes time. I have to support myself if I'm the only one able to support me, or if someone wants to give me support and they're able to do that, I receive that support and then I can regulate. Now, if I'm the spouse with the wife or the HSP in the grocery store that just got hit, it can be so tempting to say, well, they didn't mean anything by it, and justify and try and dismiss.
Yes.
That's the worst thing that you can do for an HSP at that moment. Now, later, they may be open to that. But at that moment, what that HSP needs is support. I can see why that would be, frustrating, scary. Tell me more. How did you feel when that happened? Do you really care about me and you want to know how I feel? Oh my goodness, that's the biggest remedy ever to help me regulate my emotions. Sometimes people are like, I don't want to hear about it. Just get over it. Well, guess what? It doesn't work like that. With an HSP, support is vital. Now, if I'm all by myself and somebody does that, then I have to give that support to myself and I have to show love to myself. And then after I show love to myself, then I can show love to the other person.
Wow. Amazing. I really hope that helps that EnvisionAir listener who had asked that question.
So
and how, because part of the other question was how he can show up for her and support her when she's triggered. And so that's really, really, really interesting. Very good technique. So thank you.
And it may be as simple as, just being with the person, like I was mentioning. Some HSPs really like touch. So you might just, touch their arm or pat their shoulder, or some like eye contact, some like, conversation. So it just depends. A person, an HSP may not be ready to express because they may be processing it. So allowing them to have that time, whatever time they need, and to be okay with their feelings. So many times, if I am dealing with somebody that's having an HSP that's having a strong reaction or feeling the emotions keenly, it can be uncomfortable for me. Like I said, I could feel helpless. I could take on that feeling. I could be like, I just don't want to have this happening. I just want to fix it, make it go away. So many people want to fix it, make it go away. The best way to fix it and make it go away is to allow it, to accept it, to understand it's temporary. And it's okay if we feel these feelings. Our feelings aren't going to kill us. We think they are, but they aren't. We can just be with our feelings and actually lean into our feelings and embrace those feelings and be friends with those feelings. What are you trying to teach me? What can I learn from this experience? What can I learn from this emotion? This is not a weapon, against me. And so
100%.
Those things, if I was helping someone to support someone as an HSP, I would help them to understand that.
Beautiful. That's great advice. Thank you. Thanks, Karen. We have 2 more EnvisionAir listener questions. And I'd love to get your views on it because I think it'd be really, really helpful. One has a child, they think it might be an HSP. And the mom wanted to know what general advice you would offer her in terms of how she can help her child navigate life as an HSP.
So this is a great question because if the mother, this is the mother that's asking this about the child.
Yeah.
So if the mother is an HSP also, it's a different dynamic. And if the mother is not an HSP, and this is foreign, then it's a different dynamic. So let's say that she's not an HSP and the child is an HSP. The HSP child will often get overwhelmed easily, will feel things so keenly, will cry easily because that's one of the first reactions. Sometimes an HSP will have angry outbursts because they don't know how to deal with it. And they may think somebody is trying to hurt them. And so they get defensive. But allowing that child to feel the emotions. So if they are feeling the emotion, to just help them feel safe to feel that emotion. So when I had, my children are all highly sensitive. And so as they had those strong emotions, I would try to get them close to me. Now, this is very interesting because there has to be a high level of trust. So first work on the relationship. first work on the trust, and then you can do these things. But so you show love to the child and you reflect back. You could say, like, one of the things that I would say is, I can see you're having a strong reaction to that. Yes, I am. And when they're not verbal, I used to use pictures. So I would say, show me the, like, I had faces with different expressions. I would say, show me which face you feel. How do you feel? And so they would point to the thing and I'd say, oh, you feel sad. Oh, you feel angry, or whatever the emotion was. So even before they were able to express what the emotion was, they could tell me what the emotion was, pictures. And then I would validate the feeling. So maybe I think they are overreacting. I can validate that feeling. I could say, oh, you feel scared. And then I relate back to myself. I've felt scared before. I know how that feels. So I normalize that this is a normal emotion to feel scared. Maybe I didn't feel scared in the same situation that they did. Yes. But I let them know that I understand and I have felt that. And then with that validation comes safety. So I build my trust in that relationship that way, so that then that more can be, tell me more of how you feel. Tell me why. Now, if a child's verbal, they can tell you all kinds of things. And then you can, after, so then they are starting to, as you've heard the saying, name it to tame it. Amazing principle. Just picking out the picture, I could see my child start to emotionally regulate. And then naming it helps adults and children, all of us, start to regulate, which is a fascinating concept, that just naming it has that much power, but it does. And so then I help them understand their feelings, and I help them know that it's okay to feel that feeling. It's okay if you feel that way, and especially if I've ever felt that emotion, which how many of us have not felt all the emotions? I mean, we've all had those things. And so, but then when I express how I understand that, then I feel even safer. I start to de-escalate even more as a child. And then when you express love to me and tell me how much you love me and how much you care about me, now you're showing it, now you're saying it. I'm safe in this environment. Then I start to be able to tell you more about what I feel. Then when things are more regulated, and it might not be right at that moment, it might be later at bedtime, you might have a discussion. Let's talk about what happened earlier today. Are you interested in my thoughts about it? At some point in time, you'll be able to help that child to see things differently. And that's one of the questions I ask myself. Are you willing to see this thing differently? Because sometimes I'm so entrenched. I think, nope, this is the way it is. I'm right. They're wrong. That's all that it is. And I think that way sometimes when I'm emotionally dysregulated. But when I start to feel safe and I start to say, I wonder how that person feels. So I would do that with my kids. But don't do that first, because if you do that first, it feels like you're invalidating me of how I feel. It feels like you're dismissing me and that my feelings aren't important. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about how that person feels. I want to talk about me. I want to talk about my feelings. So that's really important, especially for a child. And sometimes I would do this with role playing. So sometimes I didn't say, well, when you did that, this person might have felt that way or whatever. I didn't do it that way, because then that defensiveness starts to come back up. But I would role play, and I would say, okay, what if Susie and Mary are having this interaction? I would not use the same situation, because otherwise they would think, oh, she's talking about me, but I would use a different one. And so I would say, what do you think might be going on in Susie's mind? What do you think Mary might have thought about that? And I just talk about perceptions and about interpretations and about how we can look at things differently. And I show how those people can, emotionally regulate themselves. And so I would teach those things in story form. I still do it with my children are all adults. They're all married. And now I have 5 grandkids. And now I teach my grandkids those skills, because I want them to know that first and foremost, that I love them more than anything. They are the most important thing. And their feelings are allowed. They're allowed to feel the way that they feel. And we will figure this out. We can do this, but only in that environment of love. And when I am expressing empathy to them, and I call that the empathy advantage. And that gives you the advantage of building that trust in that relationship, whether it's with the child, with a spouse, in the entrepreneurial world. Using that empathy is what gives you that advantage to build that trust, to build that relationship.
I love that. That is amazing. Well, that moves very well into the next question, which is from an HSP himself. He's entering the entertainment business, which is notoriously known for being full of rejection and some nasty characters. Any advice that you can offer him? Obviously, I know that there's been so much that I'm sure he's picked up on so much throughout the whole episode, but do you have anything specific for him?
Well, first, I think it's very helpful to understand that there may be some negativity there. Like you said, there may be some toxic behaviors there. There may be some criticism or different things. And so knowing that I'm going into a situation and that may be a possibility, I am better prepared. I'm like, okay, this is going to be a chance. Make sure that I've got my tools, make sure that I'm reviewing all my tools, make sure that I am practicing self-care, make sure I'm doing my mindfulness. Don't just go in there without your armor. Make sure that you are showing your self-love so that you can come in it in the best way that you can. Empathy. If somebody, in the entertainment world is saying something toxic to me, I can show empathy to them, even if I don't say anything. I can show empathy in my mind. I can think, oh, they must be having a bad day or whatever. And then that energy kind of like seeps through your pores. It's so fascinating how it happens. But the most important thing is to show empathy for myself. So if it does hurt my feelings, if I do feel rejected, if I feel, criticized or whatever it is, to love myself through that process. I might have to go to the bathroom for a minute, time out. Everybody has to do that sometimes, right? So I might have to go do some mirror work at that moment. And then I show that love to myself. And then I say, what can I do with that information? So if you just told me that I, read my lines wrong and I'm a lousy actress or whatever, I might say, is there anything that I can take from that is helpful? Because I could really sting to hear that, especially when I care so much about this thing and I want this thing so much. But if after I'm regulated, after I feel loved, I love myself, then I can say, well, maybe I could work on my lines more, or maybe I could do whatever, But if I say, no, I did the very best I could at that moment, then I can say, that's their opinion. I'm going to let them keep their opinion. Thank you, but no thank you. You can keep that opinion over there. I do not receive that. I receive that I did the very best that I could. I'm a work in progress. I'm human. I can do better, with more training, more practice. I'm not saying this is the best I'll ever get, but I cannot receive some things. And that has been really helpful because I am a grateful person and because things come at me and as an empath, I do take those things on to say, thank you, but no, thank you. And even if it comes in with a lot of negative energy, I can still say, thank you, but no, thank you, because there was a reason why they said that. I don't know what it is, but no, thank you. I do not receive that.
Yeah.
I just give it right back to you. Or I might take it and throw it in the garbage, in my mind. I might just throw it in the garbage.
Especially if it has to do with something like that is so, let's say, superficial, like someone's looks or their, something they can't control, like their skin color, whatever it is. Like if it's, I think that's a really nice way of putting it. Like, thank you, but no, thank you. Especially if there's nothing that you can even extract from that. Right. It's just nasty, Yes. Thanks,
yes,
Karen.
Absolutely.
Gosh, this is like a masterclass on HSP. Like this is a masterclass. Everyone should be listening. I'm going to really try and circulate this as wide as I can because I think this would help so many people who are HSPs because you have just talked about so much. So thank you for being so generous with your advice and answering all these questions. We are on to the final segment, which is the EnvisionAir questionnaire. And now we get to ask you to reflect on your past, present, and future. So just fun. It's a fun feature of the podcast. And I'd love to hear what you think. So looking back towards your past, if you could give any advice to your 15-year-old self, what would it be?
I would tell my 15-year-old self how much I love her and how courageous she is and how proud I am of her for all the progress that she has made thus far. And I would tell her how much good she is doing. And then I would help her know how much good she is going to continue to do. I would help her see the ripple effect that she doesn't even know how she is impacting other people for good. And I would let her know that it's okay if she's scared. It's okay if she feels those feelings of shame, and that she's learning, and that I'm going to help her learn what I learned so that she doesn't have to suffer like I do.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Oh, I just want to hug you. That was so nice. Okay, reflecting on your present, the present moment, is anyone you could have dinner with tonight? Who would it be?
I'd have dinner with my dad. If I could have him come back and have dinner with me, because he believed in me so much. He always told me that I could do anything. He called me Miss America. And I still talk to him. I have his picture right by my bed, and I talk to him every day, every morning, night, every time I walk by. And we talk about what I'm doing, and we talk about my goals. We talk about scary things. I say, come be with me, when I'm giving this talk, or when I'm, presenting or whatever. And I always think about how he believed that I could do it. And so I would have dinner with him, and I would thank him for giving me that foundation.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Oh my gosh. That's really nice, Karen. Beautiful. So what's one goal you would like to achieve in the next 5 years?
In the next 5 years, well, I am so excited about my coaching business and about my work with the Los Angeles Tribune Women's Journal. I would like to elevate the voices of the voiceless and share stories that can inspire, because I do that on my podcast, the Hero Within podcast. But now I have the opportunity with the Los Angeles Tribune Women's Journal, and it's such a blessing to be able to have that platform, to be able to offer that to other women so that they can share their voice and then lift the world and have that ripple effect go out even more. And so that's what I am excited about.
Oh, I'm excited for you. I can't wait to just watch, and I'm going to be watching and supporting you from here. So yeah, it sounds amazing. Why don't you tell the listeners about your podcast? Because it's a beautiful podcast and I love the mission of it. So why don't you tell the listeners, because obviously we're wrapping up now. So I'd love for you to share more of what you do, how they can find you, and also about the podcast.
Yeah, so the podcast is the Hero Within podcast, and people say, why did you pick that name? And I picked that name because I felt like it was a divine, download for me that we all have a hero within, and we all have a story. We all go through difficult things in our life. We have big T, little t trauma. And I heard somebody recently say, don't even say that, just say trauma, because it's all trauma. Our brain just senses it as trauma. So I'm just going to say trauma. But we all have trauma. We all have pain in our life that we have to deal with. And so I wished that I had somebody that could have said, oh, watch out for that pothole. It's going to be kind of challenging right here. There's a storm advisory coming up. I wish I would have had somebody that was an HSP that could tell me how to navigate, different things. And somebody that even wasn't an HSP, but could just tell me how to navigate challenges in life, and how to have hope, and how to find healing. Because so many times when we're going through, especially a long-term trial, we can start to lose hope. And that's very detrimental when we start to lose hope. So I wanted people to have hope, to hear the story. So even if, you've had, maybe you're paralyzed and I'm not, I can learn so much from your story, hearing your story and how you found hope and how you navigated the difficulty, how you, the mindset things that you learned, or whatever it is that you learned. I can learn from that. I can relate to you on a feeling level, and I can incorporate the wisdom that you are sharing. And then I feel like I have a connection with you as you're sharing your story. And I wanted my listeners to have connection with the guests that share their story. And I wanted to give them hope. And so it's all about inspiring stories.
Beautiful. Love it. Well, I hope everyone goes and listens to The Hero Within, beautiful podcast. And why don't you tell people how they can connect with you? What's the best way? Instagram?
Yes, so I'm on Instagram. Instagram is The Hero Within podcast. And so you can find me there. You can send me a DM. And so, yeah, that's probably the easiest. way to connect with me. But yeah, we'll put the links in the show notes.
100%. Yeah. Definitely. And everyone obviously go visit the website if you're interested in the coaching that she offers as well. Is it KarenHallCoaching.com?
Yes.
Yes. I'll put that also in the show notes. But thank you again so much, Karen, for being on the podcast. You have been just incredible. And I learned so much about HSPs. And I think this is literally a mastermind. This is like a master class of like HSPs and how to navigate life. It's fascinating. Really, really good.
Well, Nicole, I have to tell you, it means so much to me that you want to know. I am so grateful when someone is interested and they want to know what I have learned. It brings me so much joy. And so I am so grateful. And I'm grateful for the questions from your EnvisionAirs. And I'm so grateful for their desire to learn and their desire to grow. And that just thrills me because I can learn from you and I can learn from them. And so thank you for the questions. Thank you for the joyous conversation. You just took me back in time and helped me, relive my journey, which is such a joyous thing to see progress in our life. Yeah, so thank you.
100%. Well, you're leaving a legacy with this, so I'm excited. I'm excited to share it. So anyway, all right. Mwah, lots of love.
You too.
Thanks everyone for listening to the EnvisionAir podcast. Make sure that you like and subscribe to this podcast so that you stay up to date on all of our new episodes.